Disclaimer.
Ayo, what's up, internet peoples? It's me, Derrek BREINDEL, and I'm here to bring the realness to this dumpy little YouTube channel. Folks, Halloween Horror Nights 32 proved that the teams over at Universal are bringing their A game to the world's best Halloween celebration, giving us an event where both those Horror Nights casuals who just came to see the Stranger Things and The Last of Us's can stand hand in hand with the lore nerds and the icon fanboys who are all obsessed with those nitty-gritty details that nobody else has ever heard or cared about, and enjoy an event which has never been better than it is today, man. And it is my pleasure to tell you all that thanks to some new information from my top secret insider sources inside the Universal creative teams, that this year, Halloween Horror Nights 33 will prove that we are in a brand new era for Horror Nights, where the best of both worlds can come together for an event which will continue to be better than ever before, year after year. Now, if you have never tuned into the Movie Realness broadcast before, your host, Derrek BREINDEL, has been hard at work getting all those juicy details for this full leak of Halloween Horror Nights 33 that you are watching right now. And for those of you returning to the show, I'm sure you have got a lot of questions and concerns regarding last year's broadcast, which we will address right now before we get into the details for Horror Nights 33. Cue the spooky music! Now, for those of you who tuned into last year's broadcast, which presented a full leak of Halloween Horror Nights 32, you have probably got some questions, chief among them being, "Ayo, Derrek, I watched last year's show, man, and none of the stuff that you leaked even happened. What's going on, man? Is this show a bunch of bogus?" Now, to which I'd like to tell yous respectfully that I have 100% confirmation of all the rumors before I share them with yous people. I don't believe in pushing the bullcrap, man. I'm all about the facts and the realness. I've said it a million times before. And I have proof that my previous leak of Horror Nights 32 were in fact the original plans for that event and was correct at that time. As I alluded to in that video, somebody let the Universal team know that my leak was coming, and they saw the video. In fact, they sent me this confidential email on your screen right now, where they told me that because of my Horror Nights leak, I was faced with a tough decision, man. I could either take down the video so that Universal could create the event exactly as I described, or I could keep the video up, and they could change the whole event to make me and my sources look like a bunch of lying chumps. But your host is a man of principles, and I believe in bringing the facts and the realness to the peoples by any means necessary. So I kept my video up as living proof that when Derrek BREINDEL says a fact, it takes an army of mindless industry plans to try and undermine the truth and the realness. And if that email doesn't prove my innocence, I got a bunch more proof right here. Because you see, Universal did a real sloppy job of trying to cover up the original plans for Horror Nights 32. And many of the details that I leaked to use in that previous broadcast made it into the final altered event. Proof of my Horror Nights 32 leak being legit includes, but is not limited to, number 1, the return of the icons as the face of Horror Nights in the form of Dr. Oddfellow. Number 2, the Chucky houses being these meta, non-canon riffs on that Chucky TV show, complete with cameos from both Tiffany and Glenn/Glenda. Number 3, the use of the Phantom of the Opera at the event as a tribute to the closure of the Broadway show over in New York City. Number 4, a sequel to The Bug House in the form of the Exterminators in the Hollywood Tram Tour. Number 5, the use of the Waterworld Theater over at Universal Hollywood for a special Horror Nights exclusive show. And number 6, leaking the closure of the Woody Woodpecker Kid Zone land 24 hours before the official announcement, which, as predicted, disrupted the house placements for Horror Nights in Orlando. So suck on that, you haters and trolls. That's a whole list of evidence that I deliver on the realness. And if you can't handle that, man, do your own research, man. Go back and watch last year's leak to see it for yourself. I rest my case. Now, unfortunately for Universal, in addition to being vindicated by this overwhelming mountain of evidence of my honesty, this little stunt of theirs that they tried to pull cost them big time, because I'm back with a vengeance, and I'm ready to spill all of the juicy details behind next year's Halloween Horror Nights event in a broadcast packed to the gills with more announcements than you can handle, man. But before we get into those nitty-gritty details, I am in fact obligated to let yous know this broadcast is sponsored by the official Greggo Movie Rant store and Ko-fi tip jar, which you can find linked in the description if you want to help fund future broadcasts of the show, which you can also support for free by liking the video, subscribing to Greg's channel, sharing this video on your social medias with your friends, and leaving a comment down below telling us which of these top secret leaked announcements has you most excited for Halloween Horror Nights 33. Now with all that out of the way and without further ado, let's dig into everything coming to Halloween Horror Nights 33. Alright folks, we gotta start off this leak with a general overview of the storyline and concept for Horror Nights 33, because this is a huge event that has major implications for the event for years to come. Now keep it in line with last year's event and the introduction, or rather the reintroduction of Horror Nights icon Dr. Oddfellow. Horror Nights 33 will be building upon this original story. Now you see, last year, Oddfellow finally broke free from the nightmarish Dark Zodiac realm, where he was banished after Jack the Clown slayed him during Horror Nights 17, Carnival of Carnage. Now if any of yous paid attention to theme park Twitter during Horror Nights 32, yous might have seen this very interesting clip that comes to us courtesy of the Forever Freaks of Halloween Horror Nights, where Oddfellow interacts with a guest regarding the fate of Jack Schmidt.
Nothing.
She loves Jack.
You love Jack? Jack is dead.
Jack is never dead.
Jack is dead.
He's just locked in the box.
I have news about Jack. He's not here. I am.
Are you sure?
I'm positive. Jack is dead. He's gone. Never coming back. You know why? Because he's not immortal like me.
You hear that, folks? Oddfellow thinks that Jack is dead, but he's wrong. Because for Halloween Horror Nights 33, the event will be taken over by Jack, Chance, and Eddie Schmidt. And together, these three characters, who will now officially be called the Triad of Terror, will help reintroduce their storyline to the Halloween Horror Nights casuals who are not aware of the deep histories and lore behind all these beloved icons. Now you see, as many HHN fans have noticed in the recent teasers, the Universal Studios gates have been taken over by some kind of fleshy growth that's been living under the park. Now this evil, which has taken root under the resort, is known as the Creeping Vines, which have been kept dormant under the parks thanks to the God of Fear Adaru and his Heralds of Fear, feeding it the screams and the souls of the guests of Horror Nights. But with new icons such as Dr. Oddfellow and the Pumpkin Lord taking the spotlight away from the Heralds in recent years, the Creeping Vines have awoken to satisfy their hunger by swallowing the entire park over the course of this year's event. This new force of evil, which will act as the source of power for the new icons as led by Dr. Oddfellow, threatens to destroy all of the old icons, unless our Triad of Terror can successfully fight back against this evil horde. When combined with Oddfellow's storyline from last year, as well as the cameos that he'll be making as a recurring villain throughout this year's event, the story of Horror Nights 33 will follow the domino trail started by Horror Nights 32 and create an interconnected, multi-year storyline, which shall climax in an incredible finale that features all of the Halloween Horror Nights icons just in time for Horror Nights 35. Now while I do have some insight on the greater plans that the Universal creative teams have for this astonishing story, details such as the inevitable Jack vs. Oddfellow house that is coming in the future is another plate of cookies for another glass of milk. So be sure to stay tuned for future broadcasts where we'll be sure to give you all those juicy details as they come out and become relevant. But back to Horror Nights 33. This year, the Triad of Terror will be bringing untold havoc to not just one, not just two, but all three Universal parks. Together, these three masters of horror will be terrorizing guests with a brand new stage show and some unique food and drink offerings, plus 9 unique scare zones and a whopping 11 haunted house mazes, one of which is technically a house with 2 paths, so you can say it's 12 houses if you really want to push it. But on top of that, there will be 3, count them 3, original icon houses, one of which will finally cement Eddie Schmidt as an official Horror Nights icon. And on top of that, they'll be adding some extra fun for those of us who are brave enough to enter Volcano Bay during those frightfully cold Florida falls. Now with Horror Nights 33 once again returning the event to its glory days as a cross-park event, there will be a couple operational changes that unfortunately come with a couple downsides. The biggest change coming is that some of the larger warehouses and sound stages that are normally used for this event and have housed some of the most beloved mazes in Horror Nights past will tragically not be active this year, because Universal desperately needs that extra storage space to store their new summer parade, as well as various props and fixtures for their newest theme park, Epic Universe. So this year, there's gonna be some pretty major changes in the house locations. Now while we do have the recently created Fast and Furious house location, as well as the return of the Shrek maze location, thanks to that little Minions Blast ride finally opening up, Universal is planning ahead with some brand new, never before seen HHN maze locations, including some recently leaked permit plans that include the construction plans for two brand new sprung tents behind the Men in Black ride. Now while on the surface, this seems like a straightforward house location replacement plan, it is in fact part of a much larger plan by Universal, because it is part of an initiative to replace the two original sprung tents with a brand new show building that is purpose built for Horror Nights attractions. This brand new Horror Nights soundstage will have a flexible interior, allowing the Universal creative teams to produce multiple different layouts, including 3 tent-sized mazes, 2 larger houses with some extra space on the side for a lounge or a meet and greet experience, or the ever-coveted layout that includes 1 gigantic mega house that will be larger than any of the current soundstage mazes. And with how packed this event has gotten in recent years, this flexibility will be desperately needed to keep Horror Nights as the best spooky attraction east of the world's biggest ball of yarn. So while this new show space is expected to have a quick construction time, my insider sources are not entirely sure if the permits for that new soundstage were submitted alongside the construction plans for those new sprung tents behind Men in Black. So in the event they are not able to build this new soundstage for this upcoming year's event, we will see the first house plan for this original soundstage to be moved to an alternate location, which I'll discuss a little later on in the video. So because of these complications, and to help ease the crowding issues of recent years, Universal Studios is spreading this year's mazes, zones, and shows to the neighboring park, utilizing the warehouses at Islands of Adventure, which was specially built for Halloween Horror Nights mazes, but have sat abandoned since Horror Nights 15, which was nearly 20 years ago. That's crazy, man. So let's get into the details for the event proper. Halloween Horror Nights 33 will be the biggest haunt event ever held at this park so far. This 2-park event will feature some unique ride offerings available only during Horror Nights hours. In addition to the usual rides open at studios during Horror Nights, not only will they be bringing back the top secret Chucky ride audio for the Rip Ride Rocket, but the Simpsons ride will be getting a brand new ride film featuring the Treehouse of Horror theme. This extra special offering will be an amazing tribute to the legacy of The Simpsons, the Universal Parks, and Horror Nights as a whole. And with Universal's plans to demolish this beloved land in the coming years, you will not want to miss the Treehouse of Horror overlay, man. Meanwhile, over at Islands, we will be getting a revival of a Jurassic Park in the Dark ride concept previously seen at Universal Hollywood. Plus, all the attractions in the lands for Marvel, Dr. Seuss, the soon-to-be demolished Lost Continent, and Harry Potter will all be functioning during event hours. Speaking of Harry Potter, following the success of the Death Eater show / Secret Scare Zone during Horror Nights 32, there will be an expanded presence of the Wizarding World during Horror Nights 33. And while I'll detail these scare zones and houses later in the video, in addition to those offerings, the Hogwarts Express will be available for all attendees of Halloween Horror Nights. Now, as many peoples have noted, the recent refurb for the Hogwarts Express resulted in Universal updating the voice acting for Hermione on the ride. But what you folks have not found out yet is that this renovation also set the stage for a unique ride experience for Horror Nights. You see, during Horror Nights, the Hogwarts Express will feature 2 unique trips between each of the parks. Now on the trip over to Hogsmeade, guests will experience a much more intense attack from a horde of Dementors, while on the trip over to Diagon Alley, you will experience a train hijacking by a horde of Death Eaters, who inspect each of the cabins on the hunt for allies of the boy who lived. Now there are currently some top secret tests happening after hours to figure out the logistics of using live actors to further enhance the scares of these unique ride experiences. But while we wait to see if those tests go well, we gotta wait and see, man, cause personally, I'm hoping to see some costume Dementors and Death Eaters come out and scare the piss out of all the little kids on the trains, but if the tests are not going well, this might be a screen-only experience, man, but that's kind of expected for Universal. Furthermore, recognizing the increased presence of kids, teens, and families at Halloween Horror Nights, Universal will be running several kid-friendly experiences in the Dr. Seuss land, between the use of Dr. Seuss and the expanded presence of Harry Potter as the less scary areas of Horror Nights. These offerings should hopefully help corral the younger audiences without impacting the experience for us older guests. When combined with a soon-to-be unveiled chaperone policy for all guests under 18, these changes should hopefully control the behavior of the more rowdy guests, most of whom are teenagers and drunks anyways. Now, this year's tribute store will be incorporated into the story of the New York Scare Zone, depicting an abandoned auto parts factory out in the countryside. This old car factory will be where Eddie has been hiding all these years and will act as the headquarters for our triad of terror, each of whom will get a dedicated section further tying into this year's storyline. Now, the first major room will feature Eddie's garage, which will have dangling chains and collections of chainsaws on the walls, which occasionally go off without warning, scaring potential shoppers. The second room will be Chance's playroom, featuring various mannequins dressed up like characters from Horror Nights past, some of whom have been used for target practice. And finally, the third and last room of the tribute store will feature Jack the Clown's Fairgrounds, complete with a derelict carnival game collection and Jack's traveling caravan, which will act as the photo opportunity of a lifetime. With regard to food and drink offerings, in addition to the return of the fan favorite No Chance in Hell deep fried PB&J, the food offerings for Horror Nights 33 will truly elevate this event as the ultimate Halloweeny food festival. The headlining dish for this year's event will be Jack's Big Top Super Stacker Burger, directly competing with last year's Oddfellow Carnival hot dog. Jack's Big Top Super Stacker Burger will be a triple patty smash burger with 3 layers of cheese, topped with potato sticks, candied bacon, and the Montana Nut Burger spread, which is apparently like crushed peanuts mixed into some Cool Whip or something. This burger will be sandwiched between 2 elephant ears dusted in powdered sugar and drizzled with your choice of hot honey, caramel, or chocolate sauces. Other culinary treats this year will include, but are not limited to, the Ginger Dead Cookie Platter, which features gingerbread folks modeled after the icons, Eddie's Super Secret Surprise Sausage, a hot dog whose sausage meat blend will change every week, and finally, the Terrorific Trifecta Charcuterie Board, which will feature various spreads of delicious items including Jack's Darker Than Hell Chocolate Blender Dipping Sauce, Chance's Roasted Nuts, and Eddie's Aged Toe Cheese Chunks. Now, as for drinks and cocktails, this year's headliner will be the spiritual successor to the blood bags of Horror Nights past, in the form of syringe jello shots, which will come in a trifecta of 3 glorious flavors. These flavors include the Corpse Reanimator, a green Corpse Reviver jello shot that references the Herbert West Reanimator movie, the Bloodier Mary, a red Bloody Mary jello shot that references Horror Nights icon Bloody Mary, and finally, the Wicked Overgrowth, an orange pumpkin spice old-fashioned jello shot that references the Pumpkin Lord. Other delicious drinks include, but are not limited to, the Alien Blood, which will be a green-colored spin on the Blood and Sand cocktail, the Cindy Kane Sipper, a non-alcoholic twist on the Shirley Temple, and finally, Oddfellows Jungle Juice, which will be served in your choice of either a traditional Blinky Cup or a specialty Blinky Cup Soul Jar. And for those of you with a day drinking problem, the Dead Coconut Club will return with a brand new theme, as this year, the Dead Coconut Club will be transformed into the Dad Coconut Club. Decorated with statues of the Universal Classic monsters, depicted here as exhausted parents wrangling their bastard offspring, the Dad Coconut Club will serve as a touching tribute to the many dearly departed musicians and artists who our dads still obsess over to this day. Some of which include Bob Marley, Kurt Cobain, Frank Zappa, and of course the beloved and well-missed Jimmy Buffett. Rest in peace, man. And thankfully, Universal will now be accounting for the popularity of this bar, as all the private events will now be held in the neighboring Bob Marley Experience courtyard, allowing Universal to continue selling private event space without interfering with the core guest experience of the Coconut Club. Now with all of this stated on the record, let's get into the plans for the parks, starting with Volcano Bay. Now I don't want to get your hopes up, but in spite of the many colorful rumors of the past, the offerings coming to Volcano Bay for Horror Nights aren't gonna be anything too crazy because, like, this is a water park. With all the water on the sidewalks and stuff, Universal doesn't want the guests getting so scared that they slip and crack their heads on the pavement like the eggs I had for breakfast this morning, cause that's like a liability or stuff. But while Volcano Bay will not host any houses or scare zones, among the HHN offerings coming to Volcano Bay, there will be a special meet and greet experience that features our Triad of Terror in new exclusive costumes, including Lifeguard Eddie, Beach Babe Chance, and Pool Floaty Jack. Additionally, after sundown, there will be a special takeover of the wave pool and lazy river themed to the recent hit film Night Swim, featuring special audio and the film's soundtrack, as well as projections of the film's trailers over the park's iconic volcano. Though these offerings are far less complicated than what we see in the parks themselves, the success of these limited time offerings at Volcano Bay will test the waters for future HHN experiences at this park. Now, as we start our discussion about the shows, scare zones, and haunted house mazes coming to both Universal Studios and Islands of Adventure, I want to mention the Universal Hollywood experience real quick. You see, the Horror Nights experience between the East and West Coast will be somewhat identical this year. Namely because many of the houses coming to Hollywood will be the IP houses seen at Orlando, with a couple tweaks by John Murdy's team to fit in Hollywood's smaller blueprint. However, there is one major exception with a unique original house that will appear at both Hollywood and Orlando, which I will point out once we get to it. So with that said, let's move on to everything coming to studios and islands. With regards to the shows, we got a lot to love this year, man. Now, the crew behind the Nightmare Fuel show have already confirmed their return via an Instagram post. But in addition to the return of this wildly popular show, Universal will have finally fixed the Lagoon show in Studios Park after that hurricane came in and destroyed the place like a kid kicking in your sandcastle. It was a mess. But this new Lagoon show will be hosted by our icons and will use water projections and drones, weather permitting. But for those of you who need more icon goodness in your life, yous are in luck, because the Toon Lagoon Theater will host a brand new stage show called Hack and Slash. Hosted by our Triad of Terror, Hack and Slash will be a live game show styled show where each third of the audience votes in an intense competition between Jack, Chance, and Eddie to see who performs the most gruesome kills throughout the show. This show will have 3 different endings based on audience feedback, and at the end of the season, the totals of each host's wins will be tallied to determine who is crowned the ultimate champion of the blade during the final performance of the season. And I don't want to spoil the plans or anything, but depending on how the audiences vote, it may have long-lasting implications for the future of this long-lasting, multi-year Horror Night story. So vote wisely is all I'm gonna say about that, man. Now let's get to those scare zones. At the front of both Universal Studios and Islands of Adventure, these scare zones will serve as the entry zones where Jack, Chance, and Eddie will be roaming alongside other characters that you can find from across the park, some of whom will be wielding chainsaws in this zone. Additionally, these entry scare zones will spill over into the backstage pathways that connect studios and islands that are usually open for stuff like Grad Bash. But it's here that you'll be able to find some extra rare characters from Horror Nights past, and potentially even spot some cameos from old icons. Over in New York, there will be a scare zone known as Hillbilly Hill. In this scare zone, which will tie into the storyline of the tribute store, you will find a depiction of the gang of hillbilly outlaws that Eddie Schmidt has been hiding out with in between Horror Nights years. This scare zone will feature brand new sets and characters that will basically be an original mashup of the motifs and ideas you find in movies like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, The Hills Have Eyes, and The Last House on the Left. Now over in Hollywood, we will find a fantastic scare zone known as Vanity Vacation. Madame and Maestro are back in this sequel to the beloved Vanity Ball scare zone from Horror Nights 29. Now I was actually given a pitch for the scare zone, which reads as follows, quote, "Everybody's getting dolled up by the masters of fashion and beauty. Madame and Maestro have returned to put the shriek back in chic at their newest beachside boutique. From vacationers around the world to the resident beach bums of Hollywood, it's time to get your beach barge ready. Let your new masters of magnificence give you the sculpted body you deserve. This throwback zone will be loaded with audience participation and is sure to be a hit amongst both the newbies and longtime Horror Night fans alike. And the final scare zone going over in the Universal Studios Park will be stationed in either San Francisco or Central Park, depending on how they position all the houses in that park this year. But this scare zone will be known as Sindonic Station, the invaders from the 33rd moon. In this scare zone, you will encounter the aliens from Invasion, who were last seen escaping the prison from the Hell Block horror maze at Horror Nights 31, who crashed their spaceship upon trying to escape Earth's atmosphere. The item they collided with, ironically, is another UFO, which hosts a brand new breed of freaky skeletal aliens. Crash landing on Earth, these two alien armies immediately go to war, trapping us and government agents within the crossfire of their laser guns. Moving on to the scare zones over at Eyes of Adventure, we're gonna start off with the Seuss Landing Horde, which will be known as the Grinch Night Procession. Inspired by Grinch Night, the Halloweeny prequel to the holiday classic How the Grinch Stole Christmas, the Grinch and his caravan will lead guests to the Sneak Beach area for a special Grinch Night inspired show featuring stilt walkers and puppets, where the caravan will fill the area with fog as the many actors recreate the Grinch is Gonna Get You sequence from that original TV special. This roaming horde will feature various Seussian creatures who congregate around the Grinch and his caravan. This special procession show is gonna act as a real nice throwback to this often unremembered but real diamond in the rough TV special that needs to be remembered more, man. Meanwhile, the Marvel Island will host a new thrilling scare zone themed to a very popular IP known as the Amazing Digital Circus. Inspired by the horrifying video game / short story known as I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream, the Amazing Digital Circus has proven itself as a wildly popular web series. And so, much like the Crib TV scare zone from Horror Nights 30, Universal will be collaborating along with the team behind Digital Circus to bring this series to the real world. Now, while some of yous might think that I'm just blowing smoke up your behinds, I actually got some leaked pictures that prove that this information is 100% legit. As you can see based on the picture on your screen right now, these are the official costumes coming to the Amazing Digital Circus Scare Zone, which means you can expect that this area of the park is gonna be absolutely slammed this Horror Night season. Now over at the Lost Continent, there will be a special scare zone known as MINESHAFT 33, the gateway to the abyss. This scare zone in the Lost Continent will feature a storyline where a bunch of miners have dug too deep in their minds and unleashed a bunch of underground horrors and beasts from the pits of hell. You see, it's all in the title, right? Cause the number 33 is half of 66. And that's one number away from the number of the beast, which is a number that is extra spooky for you peoples who are afraid of math. Now with all those other scare zones detailed, I gotta double back and talk about the scare zones coming to both the Harry Potter lands. For you see, in addition to seeing the Death Eaters in Diagon Alley again, much like last year, there will be an additional scare zone over in the Hogsmeade land known as the Menagerie of Terrors, which will host various frightening creatures seen in the Wizarding World franchise, including a horde of roaming Dementors. This scare zone will surround the castle stage, where Universal will hold the first ever meet and greets for both Bellatrix Lestrange and Lord Voldemort. And if yous folks thought that the lines to meet the Grinch during the Universal holiday was nuts, you're gonna be in line pretty much the whole event, so get those express passes ready. Now before I reveal all the top secret houses for Horror Nights this year, we've got to talk about the recently announced originals, because while we will be getting some pretty great IP houses for this year's definitely gonna be for the super fans. And that of course is very evident by the fact that the first announcement for Horror Nights season this year has been Slaughter Cinema 2. The sequel to the much beloved classic maze from Horror Nights 28. Now we already know that as part of this house we'll be entering an abandoned drive-in movie theater, which may or may not feature a cameo from one particular usher, and experiencing the cheesy B-movie goodness of a bunch of wacky film concepts, including Heavy Metal Hell in 3D. But what yous have not been told yet is the shortlist of the other films that will be featured in this house, shown up on your screen right now. And while I don't want to spoil exactly what happens in every other part of this house, I gotta say, man, my favorite part of this house is going to be a fantastic callback to the Ghost Town house from Horror Nights 26. This movie, known as Ghost Lightning, is gonna act as a horror parody of Back to the Future Part 3, the best movie in that trilogy. And it will feature a 1950s greaser who travels back in time in his souped-up T-Bird and winds up in a spaghetti western musical. You get it? Like, the joke is that the name Ghost Lightning is the name of the town from the Ghost Town house. But it also sounds like that song, Grease Lightning, from the musical Grease. And folks, let me tell you, there is absolutely nothing scarier in this world than the act of musical theater. And of course, we gotta talk about another reveal for Horror Nights season this year, that being a house known as the Goblin Feast, which will continue the horror fantasy house trend started by the amazing Dueling Dragons house from last year. Acting as a sequel to Dueling Dragons, the Goblin Feast will be set on the outskirts of the Lost Continent. And I heard a rumor that this house is supposed to feature some original music composed by the goblin metal band known as Necro Goblin, but honestly, this year's been so chaotic that I haven't gotten an update on the status of that rumor, so take that with a grain of salt. But anyway, you folks should know that this is one of several houses continuing the tributes to the Lost Continent land, which will conclude with a Poseidon's Fury house at some point in the future of this event. The only reason we haven't gotten a Poseidon's Fury house this year is because the Universal creative teams are waiting to complete some internal demolitions of the original Poseidon's Fury show building so we can have that house inside of the Temple of Poseidon, because you know, that'd be really nice and stuff. So, with those details officially out in the open, let's get into the top secret haunted house mazes for Halloween Horror Nights 33, as confirmed by my insider sources. Starting off with the first of our 3 icon houses for the year, we have the house starring Jack the Clown, in a little horror maze known as Jack's Back, the Man in the Box. This haunted house is gonna set the tone for all the other icon houses for the year, for you see, Dr. Oddfellow will be making cameo appearances in each of these icon houses, trying to tempt these icons into surrendering their power over to him. In Jack's house, Oddfellow will tell Jack that they should set aside their differences in order to team up and destroy the god of fear himself, Adaru, promising that if they collaborate and successfully overthrow the Lantern Lord, he will allow Jack to take over the lantern and ascend as a new god of fear. However, this temptation does not succeed, causing a Jack attack against Oddfellow and his carnival minions. Bringing new meaning to the phrase Carnival of Carnage, this battle between Jack and Oddfellow's lackeys will feature the most grotesque displays of violence that we have seen at Horror Nights in years. The house will end with Jack victorious, trapping Dr. Oddfellow in his box, bringing new meaning to the title of this house. How ironic. For the second of our 3 icon houses for the year, we have Chance's house. Now, the first time that Chance had an icon house at Horror Nights, it was met with a bit of controversy, for you see, Lunatic's Playground featured some depictions of insane asylums and self-harm that a couple peoples called distasteful. And so the creative teams have done some slight tweaking to Chance and her backstory, revamping this beloved icon for her new house, appropriately titled No Second Chances, Factory of Fear. Inside this haunted house maze, Dr. Oddfellow will attempt to bribe Chance with a greater role in the spotlight. Unfortunately for him, this temptation fails, as Chance reveals her fear factory, where she has been brainwashing helpless victims into a loyal army of killer dolls. This house will be a spiritual successor to the fan favorite house from Horror Nights 24, Dollhouse of the Damned, while also basically being Universal's own original spin on a house based on the recent film Saw X, which they're not going to be doing because Six Flags did a Saw X house and it totally sucked puppet dick. So you Jigsaw fans are going to have to just live with that. Anyways, Chance and her minions will attempt to convert guests into joining Chance's dollhouse, grabbing planted actors from amongst the line to throw into horrifying torture devices. The final scene of the house will reveal that Chance is in fact a living doll, as she stitches herself back together using a series of special effects that the creative team has called amongst the most impressive they've ever pulled off in a haunted house maze. And for the third and final icon house for Horror Nights 33, Eddie Schmidt will be getting a new unique house that breaks free from the confines of his previous series of run houses, in a maze which will be called Eddie's Playground, the Fury of the Saw. In this haunted house maze, Eddie will be tempted by Dr. Oddfellow with the promise of stealing the spotlight back from Jack like he was originally supposed to for Halloween Horror Nights 11. However, unlike the rest of the Triad of Terror, Eddie accepts this deal, turning his back on Jack, Chance, and the Heralds of Fear to join Oddfellow in his schemes. Throughout this house, Eddie and his chainsaw drill team will carve a new bloody path through the followers of Jack and Chance on the road to a new terrifying future where the chance of other icons backstabbing the Heralds of Fear becomes a terrifying reality whose consequences we'll see in the coming years. Next up on the list is a haunted house theme to the Ghostbusters. But unlike most RP-focused houses, this horror maze will bring a twist to the plot summary RP concept that we see so often in so many theme park attractions. Now, while we have had a house themed to the original Ghostbusters movie as recently as Horror Nights 29, which wasn't really that long ago, this house will instead be a celebration of the rest of the franchise, namely Ghostbusters 2, with some small scenes representing those new movies with the Stranger Things kids, you know, Afterlife and Frozen Empire, those ones. Anyways, about halfway through this house, we will get some scenes dedicated to the very underrated Ghostbusters remake from 2016. But before the haters and the losers with bad taste can complain about remembering this hidden gem from Hollywood, it is quickly revealed that this is a trick, as the house has been hijacked by the one and only Beetlejuice. As good old BJ hijacks the maze and turns it into a house themed after the Beetlejuice 2 movie, his mischief goes overboard and endangers the guests as they get exposed to the terrors of the Beetlejuice musical. There's a lot of musicals showing up this year. That's kind of weird. But anyways, desperate to save us from the horrors of musical theater, the Ghostbusters jump back in the fray to fight against Beetlejuice and save us in the incredible climax of this horror maze. This haunted house, currently known as the Ghostbusters vs. Beetlejuice, acts not only as a reference to the Ghostbusters vs. Beetlejuice show from Universal's past, but also as a touching tribute to two beloved 80s film franchises. And let me tell yous folks, this house, it's gonna be an all-timer, just yous wait and see. The next maze to reveal for Halloween Horror Nights 33 will of course be a continuation of those ever-popular houses inspired by the Universal classic monsters. Now this year's Monsters house will attempt to combine the best elements of previous Monsters houses in Universal Monsters Invasion. Complementing the nearby Slaughter Cinema 2 house, Universal Monsters Invasion will have guests walk through an abandoned movie studio filled with rotting sci-fi props. Winding through this studio and potentially seeing a cameo from one particular director, guests will slip through the silver screen, and we will enter a terrifying world of the Universal classic monsters depicted entirely in black and white, with some regular flashes from hidden blacklights that illuminate the house into a bright cornucopia of neon colors, very reminiscent of those old dead exposure houses. The movies that will depict the bulk of this house include It Came From Outer Space, This Island Earth, and The Mole People, finishing with an epic climactic scene that pits the tarantula and the deadly mantis against each other in a battle to the death. And the house will conclude with a little last-minute cameo scare from everybody's favorite subaquatic freak, the Gill Man from the Black Lagoon. Well, I never understood the appeal to him, man. He's just like a fish dude. Anyway, this house will act as a terrifying celebration of Universal sci-fi B-movie history, which most people forget about. I never forgot because I always hung out in that one kind of secret room off to the side inside the Universal Monsters Cafe, man. I miss that place a lot. Let's have ourselves a moment of silence for yet another victim of the Minions Banana Blast. Okay, anyway. Our next haunted house coming to Halloween Horror Nights 33 will be a twist on the highly requested original staple that comes from the West Coast event, HOLIDAYZ, the War on Halloween. In HOLIDAYZ, the War on Halloween, we are invited by HR Blood and Guts to witness a terrifying new production inspired by true events, as Satan Claus and his demented elves try to destroy the forces of Halloween, as led by two characters from Horror Nights past. This version of HOLIDAYZ will see the glorious return of both Bone and the Pumpkin Lord. Together, our headmasters of Halloween will join forces with Blood and Guts in this house inspired by true events. And if yous don't know what I mean by that, then allow me to edumacate yous. Have yous folks noticed that there's a lot of these stooges in the mainstream media that have been squawking on about a quote-unquote war on Christmas for the last couple of decades? Well, in case you sheep weren't already aware, that's just a bunch of BS. There is absolutely no way on earth that there's a war on Christmas if during the last week of September, I can walk into a Walmart or a Michael's or a Target and I can find all their Halloweeny stuff shoved onto a discount rack off in the corner so they can sell us Christmas trees. They're selling Christmas trees in October, people. Be honest with yourself, man. How can there be a war on Christmas when these giant mega corporations and monopolies are clearly trying to bulldoze over both Halloween and Thanksgiving to force us into celebrating an unironic Christmas in July? And you know what? These companies are doing this for one obvious reason, man. It's because the only companies making any money off of Halloween are the costume makers and candy sellers. But any corporation can trick you stooges into buying plastic crap that nobody wants for someone you don't even like because there's a societal obligation to buy people useless shit for Christmas. Open your eyes to the facts and realness, people. I am not the only person who's noticed this. In fact, here's a little before and after comparison of the Halloween section of Target from the early 2000s versus in 2023. Lewis deserves better, you bunch of weasel bastards. And look, I'm just talking from the perspective of a concerned citizen and legitimate businessman. I run my own independent big box store, man, and you know what? Nobody gave me no memo that we were just supposed to throw out all the Halloweeny stuff a month before the actual holiday even happened. Nobody put me in no group chat where all these monopoly CEOs conspired together to destroy Halloween. And that ain't right, man. And all for what? So we can celebrate one holiday year round till we're all numb and nothing means anything special anymore? Back in my day, we used to beat each other to death to buy a TV for 80% off on Black Friday, man. And they took that away from us. Now, every holiday has the same sale, and it's not even that big a discount, man. Veterans Day, Memorial Day, Kick a Puppy in the Face Day, it's all the same 20% sale. It doesn't mean anything anymore. And now, they just want to erase all these pretenses and get rid of all the holidays and just replace it with a year-round Christmas. And I will not conform to this madness. I want to give my stepkids the childhood that I didn't have, where we would all run around dressed up in these crappy little costumes, searching for those houses that the newspapers keep telling us are filling the candy with the drugs and the razor blades. They keep saying it, they're even saying it now. But I've searched every house in a 20-mile radius of my domicile, and I have not yet received a single crumb of drugs in my candy in all my years of trick-or-treating. This whole narrative is a lie, it's a hoax, and it's a conspiracy of the highest order. So I'm just gonna say what we're all thinking, man. If there is, in fact, a so-called war on Christmas, I'm on the front lines. I want to live in the world where the war on Christmas is a resounding victory, and we get a year-round Halloween, where the candy is flowing, and it all gets me higher than a kite flown from the top of one of those crazy skyscraper mega casinos you find in Dubai. But that's not the world we live in. There's no justice in this place. And if yous can't see these facts for what they are, yous have got to wake up and use your eyes, man. Just stop being a little sheep and a useful idiot. You got to see the realness for what it is. And if that doesn't prove that there is in fact a cover-up of the war on Halloween that they call the war on Christmas, I guess you're just brainwashed, man. I don't know what it's going to take to wake you up, but I digress. The erosion of our culture at the hands of these mega corporations and monopolies will serve as the backdrop for this fun East Coast twist on the West Coast fan favorite holiday house, Holidays in Hell, and I'm sure it's gonna be a hit amongst the HHN fandom. The next house on the roster for Horror Nights 33 will push the fear factor of Horror Nights to new extremes. This interactive house will be exclusive to guests that are 21 years or older and require that you sign a consent form, allowing for more intense scares than ever before seen at Horror Nights. So prepare to face your fears in Barbie's Nightmare House. I have another description for this house, which reads as follows, quote, "This is no Mojo Dojo Casa house, it's worse. In this demented playground of terror, all the most twisted Barbies and Kens from countless tortured play dates will plunge you into a world beyond terror as the dolls come out to play." You know, I just noticed there's a lot of dolls coming to this year's event. Based on one of the top grossing films of the year, Barbie's Nightmare House will be a revolutionary step forward in the world of extreme interactive haunted house attractions, and thankfully, those brilliant lawyers over at Universal are adding a special clause into the consent waivers required to enter this house that allows the scare actors to fight back against any guests who try to pick fights with the scare actors. So if you fuck around, you might find out and leave with a black eye as a souvenir. That is, of course, assuming that you don't pick up one of the hottest new pieces of merchandise coming to the tribute store, which will be a brand new t-shirt that reads, I got my ass beat in Bobby's Nightmare House. This is a house for the she's, the they's, and the gays, and the reception to this experience is sure to influence future maze concepts for many years to come. Up next on the list of Horror Nights mazes is a thrilling new concept born from one of the surprise smash-hit offerings from Horror Nights 32. In this little haunted house, known as David S. Pumpkin's stupendously stupefying shack of thrills and chills, a tragedy told in 2 acts. In this haunted house maze, guests will learn the tragic backstory of everyone's favorite mascot of Halloween, David S. Pumpkins, witnessing his rise to stardom on SNL, as well as his bitter feud with his evil twin brother, Franklin J. Gordmeister. Much like the incredible Universal Monsters Legends Collide house, this house will appear in both Universal Orlando and Universal Hollywood, with both houses showcasing different parts of David S. Pumpkin's family tragedy. You better get your flight reward cards ready to visit both coasts this Horror Nights season, because yous is not gonna wanna miss this house. It's gonna be an all-timer. And so, we have finally made it to the last house reveal for Halloween Horror Nights 33. And this is gonna be a real showstopper, folks, because not only is this house based on one of the most highly requested properties in all of recent Horror Nights memory, but this will also be 2 houses for the price of 1. Guests will get to pick between 2 equally horrifying paths through this incredible haunted house. And well, there's no point keeping using any more suspense, man. Cause yous know it. Yous love it. Let me hear you say it. This house will be Five Nights at Freddy's versus Baldi's Basics. In this 2-for-1 haunted house maze, guests will get to pick between exploring the halls of the dilapidated, abandoned Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria or the liminal spaces of the school from Baldi's Basics. In the thrilling final third of this house, both of these paths will converge and combine for an epic clash to the death between the forces of FNAF and Baldi's Basics. Now, while this incredible house is currently planned to be the inaugural house placed in the new massive show building replacing those sprung tents behind the Men in Black ride, in the unlikely event that they are not able to build this new show space in time, this Five Nights at Freddy's house will instead be going inside the incredible Fast and Furious house location. This house is guaranteed to be a true masterpiece from the past decade of Horror Nights houses, and will be considered the industry gold standard of haunt design for many years to come. Now, well, folks, that about does it for this incredibly in-depth leak of Horror Nights 33. So be sure you folks tell us down in the comments below which of these houses, scare zones, or other offerings you're most excited to see, and make sure you share this video with your friends so they can also get pumped for yet another incredible year of fear. And while you're at it, make sure you drop a like and subscribe or something, and I'll be sure to drop another video on here the next time Greg leaves his dumpy little YouTube channel open on the company computer. Alright, take care, bye-bye.